Y'all tired of struggle love? Well, surprisingly, Tyler Perry has a movie on Netflix that isn't about a dusty man. The story begins with Ruth Moabley, an upcoming singer, performing at a small club while her boyfriend Marlon, his father Eli, and his mother Naomi are in the audience. While watching Ruth perform, Naomi isn't impressed, and she wonders what her son sees in her. After the performance, Brianna shows Ruth the cash they got, then Marlon shows up with Eli and Naomi. Eli excitedly chats with Ruth, but Naomi tells him they'd better get going. Ruth offers to walk them out, but Naomi declines her offer. Cyrus, Brianna, and Ruth's manager show up and greets Marlon and his parents. In their dressing room, Brianna advises Ruth not to let Naomi get to her. Then, Temu Paul Wall, Cyrus, comes in with Jermaine Dupree. Dupree tells the girls he plans to get them into so-so deaf. Excited, Brianna celebrates, but Ruth, who has second thoughts about it, silently watches her. Before Dupree leaves, he tells them that 404 will put them on the map. Cyrus then privately tells Ruth he expects her to show up in the studio the next day. Later in Marlon's car, Ruth tells him about 404, and he encourages her to go for it. But she feels troubled because of how Naomi would think of her. Marlon says she has a lot in common with his mom, but she finds it hard to believe. Naomi, on the other hand, complains to Eli about Ruth being a bad choice for Marlon, but Eli reminds her that their son is a grown man. Then he gets busy with Naomi, literally going to break her back. The next day at the studio, Ruth tries singing, but the producer notices her lack of passion. Ruth tells Brianna that they used to be poets and write songs that mean something. Now it just seems vapid. Brianna tells her she's got bills to pay, and this is who they are now. Ruth decides to quit work and goes to inform Cyrus of her decision. As expected, Cyrus throws a fit as he reminds her of the times he paid her rent and how he got her a car. She hands him the keys and some cash and promises to pay the rest later. Cyrus, in a threatening way, says she needs to fulfill her contractual obligations to him, but she remains adamant and walks away. Cyrus really is giving Temu Angus Cloud after he died, looking pale AF. That night, she calls Marlon, and Naomi picks up the call, informing her that Marlon and Eli were assaulted and are at the hospital. Quickly, Ruth and Brianna rush to the hospital, and Naomi tells them that her husband and son were shot in a carjacking. Unfortunately, the doctor comes out of the emergency room and breaks the sad news to them that the men didn't pull through. The women break down in tears, and days later at the funeral, Ruth overhears a man informing Naomi about how Eli was struggling financially and had leveraged all their properties except their old house in Pegram, Tennessee. Ruth walks to the living room and watches the guest, and to her surprise, Cyrus shows up. He says the carjacking happened because he had to get through to her, and the reason he's around is to collect his payment. Annoyed, she says she'll inform the police, but he calmly tells her not to, or else he'll take everything she cares about. Before he leaves, he tells Ruth to get back to the studio, or he'll come for Naomi. Troubled, Ruth struggles for several weeks, wondering what to do. She prays to God for guidance, and eventually leaves a farewell letter and some cash for Brianna. She goes to Naomi's place and learns that Naomi has moved out and is currently at the bus station in Forsyth, so she rushes there and gets on the bus. Surprised to see Ruth, Naomi immediately objects to her tagging along, but Ruth refuses to give in. At this point, Naomi thinks Ruth has lost her goddamn mind. After a very long ride, the women arrive at Pegram. Later that night, Ruth tries to comfort Naomi, but she's not having it, so she storms into her room and removes a cross on her wall. The next day, Ruth tries job hunting, and in her quest, she sees Home Depot people. Turns out they're waiting to harvest grapes. Although she lacks the experience, she gets on the truck and follows them to the vineyard. Lena shows Ruth the ropes and advises her not to overwork herself. At noon, Boaz, the vineyard owner, shows up and spots Ruth working during break. He walks up to her and tries having a casual conversation with her, but Ruth, who is unaware of who he is, simply responds to him coldly. With a name like Boaz, he can use his anaconda, and Boa can strick me anytime. Meanwhile, Charles, a local church pastor, shows up at Naomi's doorstep, wanting to welcome her home, but she refuses to speak to him. Before he walks off, he tells her he won't give up on her. I bet he want to get in Miss Naomi's pants. Later, Ruth shows up with groceries and informs Naomi that she got a job at Azra's vineyard. Surprised that the vineyard is still functioning, Naomi tells her that it belonged to her old friend before he died, and she wonders where his son is. Later that night, Naomi serves Ruth a delicious meal, and as she tries acting difficult with her, she watches Ruth struggle to tape their cracked-out window. Amused, she laughs at her and slowly starts to open up to Ruth. Days later, while at work, a colleague hears Ruth sing while working and confirms she was the rising star who worked in 404. During evening hours, Gino, Boaz's assistant, informs Ruth that his boss has hired her as a permanent staff member on the field. He hands Ruth her wages and officially welcomes her. At night, Lena takes Ruth to the town's country club and tries to convince her to sing for them. Coincidentally, Boaz shows up at the club, and while he unwinds, he hears Ruth being called on stage to sing for them. Although unexpected, Ruth quickly picks a song and sings it for the crowd. And in that moment, Boaz's coochie starts steaming. Right after the song, she goes to the pub to get a drink, so Boaz approaches her and tries rizzing her up, but she turns him down, proving she's strong and independent. As they converse, she learns he's Azra, her manager and vineyard owner, so she assumes he gave her the permanent role to get under her skirt. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, Cy tries to find Ruth's replacement, but the girl sings terribly.
So what you trying to do? You know.
Hey.
He asks Brianna for Ruth's whereabouts, and realizing that she has no clue, he sends Wolf, one of his men, to find her. Later that night, Ruth returns home and sees that Naomi has done her laundry. She then gets a text from Brianna and tells her she's in Tennessee. The next day, Ruth tries to convince Naomi to go to church, but Naomi refuses because of the shame of being a brokey now. Ruth then tells her she'll be praying for her, so she leaves for church with Lena and meets Charles, who's concerned about Naomi. She also sees Boaz and learns he attends the church. One time on the field, Lena shows Ruth her performance she uploaded, which is going viral. But Ruth immediately tells the five-head to take it down. On a certain day, Charles and the rest of the church pull up at Naomi's place. Upon seeing Boaz, Naomi happily hugs him, and he tells her they've come to give her house a makeover. With that, they commence the repair of the old shack. While they watch Boaz work, the ladies get thirsty.
If that ain't a gift from God, woof.
I think you're gonna need a hose.
And in a few days, everything is as good as new. After Boaz completes the final touch, Naomi convinces Ruth to take a walk with him. As they take a stroll, they open up about their past, suddenly hear Naomi scream, and rush back to her. When Ruth gets there, she sees a brand new vehicle and learns that Boaz got it for them. Lord, may this rich type of love find me. One time at the brewery, Boaz contacts Ronan and asks him to review his wine reserves after harvest. Later, Boaz takes Ruth to see Babyface, a 4-time Grammy winner, who asks her to sing for him while he plays the piano. After Babyface leaves, Ruth thanks Boaz for being so kind to her. Finally seeing her smile, he tells her to give love a chance. I'm ready to hop on love if that's what it takes. Later that day, when Ruth gets home, she tries to fill Naomi in, but she sees the old lady grieving, so she consoles her. As the months pass, Ruth continues to sing, and her bond with Naomi deepens. Ruth and Boaz also get closer, and at one time, he shows her the vintage wine, which he plans to have Ronan try out. Ruth slowly begins to rediscover herself and imagine a life beyond the pain of her past. She calls Brianna one night, and Brianna can hear it in Ruth's throat that she's throating a new man's. Brianna advises her to watch her back because Cy is looking for her, and he knows she's in Tennessee through her viral video. The next day, Ruth apologizes to Naomi for her family's death, but Naomi tells her it wasn't her fault. She then shows Ruth some of her clothing, and the women bond as they go through the stuff. A couple of hours later, Ruth goes on a date with Boaz. They about to crush the grapes with their feet, but Ruth says she got a fungus, and Boaz says that's what gives the wine a cheesy flavor. As they kiss, she feels guilty, so she changes her mind to leave, telling him she doesn't want him to get hurt. When she gets home, she cries to Naomi, saying she doesn't get to fall in love. The next day at work, Ruth acts distant towards Boaz, and by nighttime, Lena takes her to the club, trying to convince her to perform at the festival, but Ruth tells her she won't be attending. Suddenly, Ruth gets a phone call from Charles informing her that Naomi is at the hospital. At that moment, Cy enters the club looking for Ruth, but he misses her, so he asks around and comes across Boaz, who chooses to gatekeep Ruth's whereabouts from the Temu Mac Miller. Finally, at the hospital, Ruth thanks the pastor and worriedly speaks to Naomi, who assures her that everything will be fine. Naomi calls Ruth a blessing and encourages her to tell Boaz how she feels. On the day of the festival, Ruth expresses her gratitude by singing for Boaz. While at it, she sees Cy among the crowds, and she nearly stops her song, but she carries on with sheer will and drops the most beautiful rendition ever. The crowd cheers for her, but the happiness doesn't last as Boaz notices his barn on fire. He dashes straight to the storehouse where his vintage wines are, but it's too late. Ruth, having realized who the culprits are, makes up her mind to stop running. So she tells Boaz it's her fault and she'll be leaving Tennessee to confront her past. With that, she hugs him and leaves. Frustrated, he yells, wondering what he's to do. Suddenly, Detective Lansing shows up and informs Boaz that the fire incident was arson. He asks Boaz if he can recall anybody who felt threatened. He immediately connects the dots that the one whitey that showed up was probably the one. So Boaz runs off and tells the detective to get officers to Naomi's place. When Ruth gets home, she sees Cy and Big Back Wolf at home, so she packs her stuff and tells Naomi she'll be going with them. Ruth then reveals that Cy was the one behind the carjacking and arson. As they drag her away, Naomi tries to fend them off, but they hit her away. Once outside, Ruth sees Boaz and tries to warn him not to interfere, but he confronts Cy, who has a gun, and tackles him before landing some clean hits. Fatback Wolf then intervenes and whoops Boaz without restraints, and as Cy reaches for his gun, he hears a gunshot and sees Naomi holding a shotgun. She tells him that, although he took her husband and son away from her, she won't let him have her daughter. Still pointing the gun, she threatens to shoot him if he moves. She a baddie. Shortly afterwards, the cops arrive, and as they arrest Cy and Wolf, Naomi scolds Ruth for not telling her earlier about Cy. She then consoles Boaz concerning his wine before leaving them to give a statement report on the criminals. Left alone, Ruth tells him she lied to him and tries to say her farewells, feeling bad about his loss, but he refuses and tells her they can always make more wine. Later that day, while going through the burnt storehouse, Ruth suggests they take a sip from the vintage bottle, but Boaz rejects the idea, believing the heat would have ruined it. Still, she tries it out and urges him to give it a taste. Boaz takes a sip and marvels at the fact that the wine got better under the intense heat. Later, they have a white man try the wine out, and Ronan says it's going to get best in show. He then asks for the brand's name, and Boaz tells him R&B for Ruth and Boaz. Boaz tells Ruth that she's the reason behind his success, and he proposes to her on the spot. Just as he wished, she accepts, and they share a deep kiss. Time passes, and they get married. Happy, Naomi notes that sometimes the best type of love starts in the ashes. She hangs her cross with the belief that love is just, and among all the good qualities of life, love is the greatest because it always wins. Y'all, this was so cute. Finally, a love story where the woman was the dusty one, pursuing a music career. But she was always a hard worker, so it don't count. What did y'all think of this one?
If you like this video, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. We got lots more of foolishness on this channel that'll have you hollering. And if you like to watch more, just click here or here.